Welcome to the Multifamily 0 to 1 online meetup, where we discuss the best strategies to get started in apartment syndication.
Thank you everybody for joining us, our episode number 9 with Mr. Elliott. So for those, I'm sure a lot of you have joined us before, but for those who haven't, we do this every first and third Wednesday of the month, and today we focus on passive investing and how to get started as a passive investor. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this is an educational presentation and we're not making any investment recommendation. You should always consult with your CPA and attorney for financial and legal advice. A few introductions. So I'm Marcelo. My background is in IT and software development. I'm a local CCIM member here with all the CCIM designation trainings, and I'm a multifamily investor, and I own and operate commercial real estate, and I also was involved with single family fix and flips. I'll have Claudia and Martin. Can you introduce yourselves?
We are commercial real estate investors and we are based out of Houston. I am a real estate professional and I have an architecture degree. And I have a background in asset management in my properties in Colombia, South America. And now the property we are syndicating right now, we are doing the asset management. And I hold a National Apartment Association certification that's called the IROP. And Martin, you can introduce you.
I'm an IT security consultant for over 25 years. Most of my experience in that field has been as a business owner. So we have a background in business management, consulting in general. And then between Claudia and me, we have experience on real estate, asset management and investments for quite a while, both in Colombia and now here in the States. We've been investing in multifamily for the last 2 years, and we have almost 800 units now as both passive investors are for sponsors, and we sponsor our first deal last year that we are now managing and working on it every day.
We're going to have the dogs to be presenting the dogs. Introduce the dogs team.
Apparently we got a dog show going on today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you, Clayton?
All right, Mr. Elliott, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Marcelo, Claudia, and Martin, for having me on tonight. I really have enjoyed getting to know you all over the past year plus, and have met most everybody on the call, I think, too, also over this past year. So I'm an accredited investor. My wife, Gisela, and I have been investing in single-family homes since 2003. We had a handful of houses in Florida and Georgia. We used to live there. And again, going back quite some years. So my background, W-2 background by way of education, my background's in physics and mechanical engineering with a global executive MBA. Mostly I've been working in large-scale infrastructure projects, power generation and distribution over the past 25 years. So I'm a power guy by W-2 job. I still am. I like what I do. But about a year and a half ago, my wife and I got to talking, and we had all this equity growing in these single-family homes. Said, well, what do we do now? It's just kind of trapped there. And so she was doing a lot of research and, checking out all the Rod Cleaves and the Brad Sumrocks and all of the world. And so I'd say mid 2018, we really started digging in, getting serious about looking at getting an education. So as my bio says there, I'm married with 2 sons that are 10 and 14. We're all living in a house together, trying not to get cabin fever right now while everybody's coping with things right now. So I do love to travel, especially internationally. So it's a little tough for me not traveling. I travel a lot for my work and I love that. But right now I'm just kind of hunkered down. So that's the quick intro.
All right, thanks, Elliott. So we'll give everybody a chance if you want to introduce yourself and say where you're from, what's your real estate experience, and If anybody wants to introduce themselves, so we have a smaller group today. Anybody wants to do a quick intro?
First one to speak.
Yeah.
Go. Ready, go.
Clayton, you're up.
Now, I'm Clayton Bounds, Clayton in Georgia. We live in the Houston area. We started investing in apartments passively last year, and we're looking to syndicate this year and continue to invest passively. So, nice to meet everyone.
All right.
I'm Amir Mahmood and Lindsay. We are passive and active investors. A lot of you guys already know us. Hi, Clayton. We are passive on a little over 2,000 doors with Grant Cardone, Class A product, and have just officially joined the Sumrock team as an active personal student. We have a portfolio of some single-family homes involved with fix and flips and some rentals, and we're in the process of liquidating those as we speak. So that's us in a nutshell. We're in Houston as well.
All right. Thanks, Amir. Let's see. I have a couple polls here that I just want to see how everybody experienced in real estate. So if you want to answer that, that's confidential, just so we know who we have. So if you're brand new, if you are a single family landlord, a passive investor, or if you're already leading and syndicating. So we'll just give everybody a minute there. All right, we have 50% have answered. Give another few seconds. So it looks like most groups here have, let me share the results to everybody. So most people are passive investors already. We don't have anybody brand new today. And we have 3 people who are either a lead syndicator or apartment owners. And another question, given where we are with the virus, so I just wanted to see how you guys are feeling with, how you're doing in terms of your investment. So are you, this was a question that I saw on Facebook the other day, are you more inclined, less inclined, or do you feel like you're unchanged right now? So over the next 30 and 60 days. So if you're unchanged, you're less inclined to invest, or you're more inclined to invest now. I'm just curious how everybody's
I have a
looking.
question.
Yes.
I don't know how hard it is to set up these polls, but I noticed that in your last question, you got 100% response from everybody on the call that they're passively invested in apartments. I'm curious to see what percentage of the 100% of people passively invested have received some sort of proactive communication from their deal sponsors about the situation with the coronavirus and or how it's impacting, how they operate the property.
All right, that's a good question.
We have received.
Yeah, we received one from one of our passive
only
investments.
one.
Yeah.
I have several. I've gotten several.
Okay.
We haven't gotten anything yet. So I think it's too soon, really.
I mean, that's not implying that things aren't being done or changes aren't being made. I'm just curious from a communication standpoint, how many people have received some sort of update.
Yeah, I got probably 75% of my investments I got communicated, but 25% I haven't seen anything yet. So it sounds like from the poll results that most people are unchanged and they're sticking with their criteria right now. So that's good. All right, and Jay mentioned that he receives communication from one so far. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and ask Elliott a few questions. Claudia, do you want to get started?
Yeah. Well, you already told us that you were investing in single family But what were you doing before? Like before any real estate, you were just doing your W-2 job?
Yeah, yeah, the W-2 job, the 401k, the stock market, the traditional stuff that everybody has taught us to do so well in the school system. Public schools, private schools, colleges, MBA. People don't really teach you about personal financial strategy so much, right? You got to go out and get it. So, and we actually read Rich Dad, Poor Dad probably 20 years ago, and then started investing in single family homes because that's what I could do. I could go out and I could put some money down, I could get one and then duplicate it. So we did a handful like that. And the idea was to go on for years and collect them and then have a nest egg at retirement, which not a bad idea and is working fine. Well, fast forward to today and we see, okay, we got a lot of equity trapped in there and the return on that cash is diminishing. So what can you do next? So we started looking into multifamily. We started looking for a mentorship program and education programs because it was clear to us this is a whole nother world of realities that you got to get educated, you got to start meeting people, and you got to dig in. Otherwise, you could lose your money.
So what in multifamily investing as a passive investor was attractive to you?
Multifamily as a passive, well, I like that you could get good cash flow and have tax benefits. These were two of the big things, and of course I'll come right out with it too. You know, I decided to join the Sumrock group. You know, again, almost a year and a half ago. Lots to choose from, but I really like to see that ecosystem where people were investing in each other for a number of years. They all followed kind of a similar recipe. It was very conservative. I like that. And I'll tell you, when we had our single family homes back in the 2008 meltdown, our own house lost a lot of value. Our rental properties lost paper value, but they never stopped renting. So having been through a few stock market cycles of losing a lot of money and not really knowing why, until you've seen it the next day and go, my God, a big chunk of my money's missing. Now what, right? Your life just changed. Excuse me. I am fighting a little bit of allergies, seasonal allergies, so forgive me. I don't have coronavirus, and I'll promise not to send anybody a computer virus on this call. So the big aha for me across the board for multifamily was what I saw in my single family homes. I never lost renters. My rent actually kept going up over time, even in that big bust. And now the property values climb back up. Now I'm looking at selling them. So it's pretty cool. So this is just multiplying, that leverage and multiplying the skills and the knowledge of other people that I've been meeting. And as I'm invested in now 12 properties over the past year and a quarter, roughly, all in the Sumrock group. One thing that's made it very easy for Gisela and me is that the system is consistent, right? People are working with a set of tools that are consistent. So it's easier for me as I got a full-time job flying around the place, and I've got to say, okay, I'm on a plane trying to analyze somebody's deal as a passive. Well, it helps me if I don't have to learn a whole new system, look at spreadsheets that I've never seen before. And so that's really what got me when I went to the R2R November 2018. Met a lot of great people, doctors, CPAs, IT people, engineers, and the works, and myself being a recovering engineer, CPA, of course, MBA rather, sorry. Of course, Brad's story really resonated with me, and I was hooked, and that's kind of how we got in it.
Awesome. Marcelo.
So so you mentioned you joined the mentorship program. Was that how you first learned how to invest in multifamily, or did you look into different sources for learning?
Well, we were looking online at a lot of podcasts and things for several months, before going in there. So we hadn't done any investments at the time. We were trying to figure out how, right? And then what I saw in the Sumrock program was a good education platform that, had been built up over a number of years. So yeah, we hadn't actually done any multifamily investing before then. We started getting educated, looking at a lot of online stuff, podcasts from a lot of different sources, Grant Cardone, Rod Cleef, the list goes on, Joe Fairless, all the big wheels out there doing their podcasts and such. And so we saw this as a program, I looked at it like a school, right? I mean, I went and got an MBA, spent a lot of money, took a lot of time. It was a wonderful experience, but they didn't teach me this stuff. This was like a good crash course school of really getting the nuts and bolts and meeting people who were doing it that I could learn from quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Clayton, did you have a question? You raised your hand there.
No, you sort of you asked the question that I was going to ask about, the chicken and the egg. Did you invest first and then join a mentoring program, or did you join a mentoring program and then invest? But a follow-on question to that, and if you're going to talk about it later, you don't have to answer it right now, but obviously there's, some education around tax implications and, what that all looks like investing, out of a retirement account into a passive investment that somebody's sponsoring, syndicating. At what point along your process did you start digging into that and learning about that? Or did you kind of educate yourself on all that up front and before you pulled the trigger the first time, or was kind of like went ahead and invested with people that, that you knew, liked, and trust and understood the deal, and then you figured all that stuff out later?
I'd say I'm more of a answer B, Clayton. I was a ready, fire, aim guy. My wife, who I give all the credit for, helping me get into this, find this whole niche to begin with, very analytical. I am the ready, fire, aim guy. I'm a driver personality type. So I got in quickly. I met some people, actually through a lot of different paths all at the same time, kind of at the end of 2018. And so our first deal we got into using rollover IRA money. And before that, I didn't even know you could self-direct an IRA investment. And now this week I'm setting up solo 401ks to avoid the scary UBITs that people didn't tell me about when I came in. So that said, it wasn't a disaster. It was actually, I was started to invest with self-directed IRA money to begin with. Said, okay, this is a long game. Get some investments going. Know, like, and trust. Simple business model. My first deal I invested in was a 75-unit townhome community. It was an easy business model to get my brain around as a new student. It looked good. It was backed by, it was actually with a new syndicator, but backed by someone I would consider kind of a whale in the business that partnered with him. So, and I met both these guys, interestingly enough, at the Sumrock Christmas party at the end of 2018, shortly after becoming a student and absorbing all these lovely webinars. And I'm in there going, okay, you're closing up something by the end of the month. And I met several people actually in that same trip whom I already had met before in the system, and they were investing in the deal and they're telling me why and about it. So there's all this like co-learning going on at the same time. It was really awesome. And by the way, that property has been performing right on pro forma from right out of the chute. It's just been fantastic. And most of them have been doing fairly well so far. And we'll see what happens to us all with the coronavirus. We're all reading that every day. But yeah, I was more the ready, fire, aim guy. And then I got in there and I said, because it's IRA money, it's something you can do it. And so I got some deployed, and then I started saying, okay, I'm gonna have to convert these. So now I'm opening up a solo 401k. And I'll be converting them all over to that. And I didn't know about that before either, right? There's so much you just learn as you go by asking questions, but great question. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Clayton.
Quick follow-on question, and actually you kind of brought this up in your explanation, but the implication of UBITs and the, you wanting to go set up a solo 401k to kind of protect yourself, shelter some additional tax liability. Did that come from a CPA that you found through, multifamily, or did you learn about that through your network of syndicators and investors and so forth?
Yeah, I first heard about it through my coach in the Sumrock group, actually. Was told, hey, yeah, you're doing this is good, and really it's nothing to panic about because the UBITs don't hit you until you sell the properties. It could be 5 years from now, right? So I said, all right, look, I have to go set up an LLC and then, legitimize this thing. I'm like, okay, it's a little scary. It's a powerful tool, but can be a dangerous tool. So I wanted to learn about it. So I said, the heck with it. I just kept doing I went through Quest and kept doing self-directed IRA investments. And then we did some cash investments also this year, so we could take advantage of the great tax benefits. So even as a passive, right, you can take advantage of that bonus depreciation and all, so we really started doing that in 2019, and that's all been great. So now it's not really a big deal actually converting over to solo 401k, and I like the idea of having more control over it, as well.
I got a quick question, if you don't mind, real quick. And it's kind of on to your comments, Elliott. So you work for corporate America still, and you mentioned 401k. So I'm in a traditional 401k with my work. And I know I'm not asking for advice, but I wanted to see if you face this challenge, more or less. So the traditional 401k, you have multiple options. You can take a loan against it. You can take a hardship against it. You can retire at 59 and a half, or you can quit your job to pull that money out.
Mm-hmm.
Those are obviously the four options. Is your 401k that you use traditionally, is there another avenue that I'm missing or not misunderstanding that you may have used for your deals?
You mean like from your W-2 job?
Correct.
Yeah. For me, I didn't see any avenues where I could deploy conventional 401k from a W-2 into much of anything except what they offer you, right? Which is kind of limited. For me, the big upside with 401k has been, okay, whatever they match, I put that in there. I make the match just for showing up, even if I don't put it in anything and risk it. Right? So I kind of do that. And then I've been maximizing the money that I could take aside from cash and rollover IRA money for apartment investing. So yeah, it's all been rollover IRA money from prior W-2 jobs. And I see you have a Caterpillar diesel engine, or is that on your shelf back?
Yeah, I was gonna say we were late. I'm in the power generation industry myself.
Okay, I was gonna ask, because
that's a generator.
So super. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else. And again, I like the disclaimer at the beginning, Martin and Claudia, because that's me. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a financial advisor or an attorney. We're all learning here together, and it's awesome. But yeah, 401k, I don't know if much you can do with it. It's kind of trapped in the company.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't want to derail the call, Amir, but I mean, we can talk offline, and I'm not a CPA, but I'll tell you that you can open a self-directed retirement entity, IRA, self-directed IRA, solo 401k, whatever. You can do that at any time you want. But if you want to get money out of your corporate 401k into a self-directed entity, it takes some other kind of compelling event, like, you change jobs, or you're acquired by someone and they release you and you can roll it over, blah, blah, blah. I would suggest, talk to a CPA that can give you some guidance. But if you think you want to start self-directing, go ahead and get some advice and open a self-directed account and start building that. And if at some point in the future you have an opportunity to roll your corporate 401k money into that, there are ways to do that. But talk to a CPA about it.
And just one more thing to close the loop there. There are very few that I know that, and I think like General Motors is one of them, that they have a provision that you can do some sort of in-placement distribution even without leaving the company. And you can take the money from the 401k and transfer to an IRA, and then you can self-direct it. But there are very few companies that allow that. So I would look into contacting your plan administrator and asking that question, because I do know I have a couple colleagues that they were working for, I think General Motors was one of them, that had a provision that even without leaving the company, you could transfer the money, do a rollover to a self-directed IRA, but it's very few as far as I know.
Yeah, and the typical ones, the financial institutions like Fidelity or Bank of America, Wells Fargo, all of those, when they manage 401ks, they don't let you do anything. So they'll, you have like Clayton said, you have to leave the company or something like that. That's my case for my W. Yeah, and I think the question from Amir was raised based on the solo 401k. They don't have anything in common other than the name between the regular 401k and the solo 401k. So as Clayton mentioned, check with your CPA. What are the options for that? I know it's way more complicated than doing a self-directed IRA. So research into those two options and see which one works for you. Yeah. Okay, so going back to our guest, yeah, I was going to ask you. So for that first one that you found with the 35 hometowns, were you focused on the type of property, the type of deal you were waiting for, or were you comfortable with any type of market as long as you were fine with the sponsors, that there were people that you knew and trust? What was your criteria there?
Yeah, I mean, my criteria for looking at that point, I was interested in kind of smaller deals to start with, right? Because again, from a business model and from the analyzing and all, it was a lot easier to get your brain around. It was 76 units, but one was an office, so 75. And, again, the deal sponsor it was his first deal, but he did have a lot of relevant business background. For the deal. I liked the way that he communicated with me about it and answered questions, because I had a lot of questions, being my first one. I remember flying home from the Christmas party. We were living in Raleigh, North Carolina, and there was a big snowstorm going there. And we were lucky to even get home. But Giselle and I had this laptop, each with an earbud in one ear on the internet of the plane. Because it's like, okay, well, look, here's our first one that actually looks kind of interesting for us. We weren't in it very long. We had just seen a few deals, but this one just, it was easy to get our brains around again. And I think one underlying factor, you keep hearing know, like, and trust. To me, that is enormous, right? I mean, it's about relationships, it's about reputation. And then this fellow had I'll tell you what it was a Hampton Townhomes. Darren Batchelder was the guy, right? And so he teamed up with Raj Gupta, who had quite an impressive resume, and I met them both. They both were very available, accessible to answer questions galore. Again, I had lots. And so I built that trust and the understanding. And for that matter, I was even able to see the entire deal spreadsheet, not just what went into the business plan, because I asked questions. I said, okay, these guys would open the kimono here, right? And that's important. I like to know, I'm an engineer by background. I like to know what's under the hood. I like to understand how it works. And these guys did a fantastic job of getting us what we needed to get comfortable. And lo and behold, it's been performing like a clock.
Good. So for someone that would be first time looking for the first passive investment based on that deal, and you remember you had very little experience, you were looking for that first one, what would be your most important advice for them? What to look for and what to avoid?
Well, my most important advice would be get educated. And then when you think you're educated, get educated some more, because it never ends, right? And for me, I felt like, even though I had owned rental properties, actually we've self-managed rental properties for 15 plus years. And it was pretty easy in the end, right? It was kind of a lonely business, but it was still not so hard to do. So here now you're talking about investing in something you don't necessarily even know how the mechanics work going in as a new investor, right? So get educated, read lots of books, go to all the meetups you can, watch all the podcasts you can, and get a mentoring system of some kind. Get educated, and if you invest in that education first. That's the very most important thing, so that you're able to make at least hopefully wise choices, but certainly with some knowledge going in.
That's good. Yeah, great answer.
And how do you, you mentioned you got on the laptop and on your first deal when you're looking into it. So do you have any tips for somebody starting to analyze deals? Do you have any assistance from an underwriting perspective that you can provide to somebody that want to like quickly look into a deal and know is this something I should invest?
Well, I think for us, it's an easy answer to say, if you're looking at, for example, we signed up for the Sunrock program, right? So again, that made it easy for us. We have tools that we can take the numbers that we see in the business plan, and we can run those tools and do our own sensitivity analysis, for example. So my advice would be, I mean, I think probably most of the people on the call, if not all of us, could be Sunrock students. It's kind of is easy to relate, right? But I haven't had that same experience from outside this group. I'm sure there's quite different ways of looking at it. So I like to take this, call it tried and true recipe, and go back and underwrite the deals that I see from the deal sponsors and say, okay, what happens if I tweak this, tweak that? What kind of impact might it have, right? So one of the things very important to me and my wife right now, especially with this coronavirus thing going on, is conservative underwriting, right? And to have that stress test information. I've seen some great business models which show hardcore stress tests. What happens if it really hits the fan? You know, what's going to happen to my investment? Excuse me. So, yeah, so now more than ever, you really want to look at that, you know, what happens with rent shocks? What happens, my God, what's going to happen with coronavirus? We still don't know. But we're prepared to hunker down. We know we're not going to see distributions in a lot of cases for some time. But I'd rather see that and have half my money disappear. We're patient. Again, this is a long game. And that's another big piece of advice I'd give for anybody in passive investing. It's a long game. Don't, you know, it takes you 6 months to even start seeing any cash flow from this one, right? So if you're in a hurry, you know, maybe look somewhere else, go to the stock market, see what happens.
What are some indicators that you see that somebody is being conservative? Because almost every syndicator will say, oh, I'm a conservative underwriter, right? You don't have anybody that says, hey, invest in my deal. I'm very aggressive underwriter.
I'm loose and crazy, right, Martin? Yeah. No. Yeah, you're right. Well, what I look for is no big swings in, you know, in expenses or income. Like if somebody comes and says, I'm going to change this from 24%, you know, economic vacancy to 12% in the first year, I'm not so sure. You know, I look for big swings, you know, big upticks in rent, you know, pro forma rents that are really big changes, right? I like these incremental step changes because in a normal environment, historically, and my rental properties too, you know, the things get built up, you can increase the rent over the years, even if you don't do much to it. The other thing I look for is a lot of meat on the bone going in. I've seen some deals, several deals where people plan, you know, it's mostly upgraded and they're going to finish upgrading it. And I said, well, geez, sell it to if you do everything, right? So I like to see business plans where there's a lot of room to upgrade. And so, for example, if I'm looking at IRA money, I look for that, more meat on the bone to upgrade and force appreciation over the long term. And if I'm investing cash, of course, I'm looking for the tax benefits, which are great, but I'm also looking for strong cash on cash going in the door. So if you have to hold the property through a recession or whatever, hey, fine, just keep sending me mailbox money and I'll be very happy with you, right? So those are some of the big, I'd say some of the big rocks that Giselle and I look at when we've been passively investing.
All right, and Harry had asked a question here on the chat. He was asking that as you've learned more about investment and apartment investing, has your strategy for passively investing changed and any investing regrets?
Yes, thanks. Great question, Henry. Yes, it's not without regret at all. We have had seen pretty good performance for the most part. We've seen in some cases where we might get into something because it looks good or there's a great presentation and the numbers look good and the sponsor team has, you know, some good history, but maybe they weren't as familiar with the demographic they were getting into, or some change like that happened that didn't show up in the business plan. So, of course, like anything with experience, one of my favorite expressions is that good judgment comes from experience, which I'm sorry, yeah, good judgment comes from experience, which usually comes from bad judgment, right? So this is the loop that you have to go through, and you hope that you don't make any big mistakes. But I would say that one of the things that's changed for me and for us is we kind of look more now for teams. If we see teams that are just pounding out deals every other week, how are they going to manage it? Like Claudia and Martin are, we've really enjoyed getting to know. We see them really, and I'm gonna inflate your egos a little bit. We see them as actually good model citizens for a conservative approach to do this kind of work, right? Because they worked hard at it. They didn't go for 10 in 1 year, and so some of the experience we've got is when you have people trying to just pound out sponsorship deals, what happens is the communication naturally diminishes to the investors. And especially if the deal is struggling some, man, that's when you need to over communicate. I want to hear every bad thing that's going on too, so I can say, hey man, we're with you. We get it. Maybe I'll have an idea that I can call them up and say, hey, dude, this can help you, right? But so where we've seen it toughest, Henry, is when we see people, doing deals just to do deals or doing too many of them too fast. And conversely, when we're seeing these 1 a year more kind of thing, or 2 a year, or if it's a seasoned investor teaming up with a few new guys, 2 or 3 of them going on, but I'm tending to shy away a little bit more from when I'm seeing too many deals at one time going through the same small teams. Just how do you manage it with the kind of depth that it's going to take now? And it's all operational, right? It's not cap rate based anymore. It's all about operational prowess.
Yep. Clayton, you have a question?
Yeah.
I have a question.
If I can unmute.
Yes, what's in
Certainly not an urgent question. I love that you're premeditated about how you approach your passive investing, depending on whether or not this is tax sheltered retirement money or this is cash money out of pocket, where the cash on cash return is, has a material impact on your quality of life day to day now. In light of the fact that this, really this webinar is more skewed towards passive investing and the thought process behind passive investing. And I know this is a little bit impacted by being part of a mentorship group or an ecosystem of, fellow investors that you develop relationships with and befriend, and, I'm just as likely to come over and help you lift an engine out of your car and work on it all weekend than invest with you, that kind of relationship. But at a macro level, how do you approach vetting the sponsorship team and the general partnership? I mean, you touched on conservative underwriting, you touched on like stress testing in the underwriting, being able to articulate that to potential passive investors and how that gives you a warm fuzzy. But what's your personal methodology on vetting the people that are actually taking the deal down, are going to operate this business and provide the business plan and pro forma that you're hoping that is going to come through?
Well, that's a great question, and it's funny you mention it because this weekend I'm going to be lifting an engine out of my car, and I was going to offer to have you come by and discuss your question. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, vetting the sponsorship team for me, it's a partnership, right? It's like a marriage, and when these partnerships don't go well, then of course it's bad for everybody. So one of the things I look for with the sponsorship team is what their working experience has been, both their track record, because we've got people that, have done a lot of house flipping and single family homes, and maybe it's their first deal, maybe it's not. But then the question is, have they worked together before? And if so, how often? So there's some sponsors that we've invested in 2-3 different deals that they're in the teams of, because we know we've worked with their team. We've got to meet everybody on their team over the past year and a half and got to know them. So we're actually more inclined to invest in with teams of people we've met, right? Which makes these meetups and in-person things so important, because then you actually get to know the people. So for me, it's more about, again, track record. Do they have skin in the game? What does their exit strategy look like? Have they worked together? If so, how often? And what has been, if they've been full cycle, that sure helps even more, right? Because then they got a track record of actually leaving. Now I might ask the question, how would that partnership handle downturns, right? And these rent shock issues like we're dealing now. And I'm seeing a lot of interesting ideas come up, right? From people on Facebook. People are trying to come up with solutions for how are we going to deal with this. And it's quite impressive to see the community coming together going, okay, how are we going to do this besides just take it in the shorts when we get hit with, delayed evictions and things like that are coming out. So yeah, it's a relationship business. So for me, I'm in more than the deal itself. I'm investing in my trust in those people I've got, getting to know, and their record. I hope I answered your question, Clayton. If not, we can have a bourbon and lift that engine this weekend.
No, you're good. You're good.
I was actually going to ask you if you have invested twice or more than twice with the same investor, with the same sponsor or same sponsorship.
Yes. Yeah, I have. I think it was a little hard to hear you there, Claudia. So I think
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But did you hear my question? But I think you already answered. Yeah. I was curious about that. Have you repeated investment with the same sponsorship team?
Yeah, I think, and again, I think we've done 2 with a couple that we really have enjoyed working with, and then 3 with, again, sometimes it might be a team that's a partner. You're actually in one of them, so that to where, these same partnerships, they keep going strong, or if they have C-class properties that are performing, rolling out good distributions, they get my attention, right, for encore performance, hopefully.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. So, do you have any special techniques or tips or tricks when you're doing a quick analysis?
Any tips in a quick analysis? Well, again, most of the ones I'm looking at here passively, seriously, they're, fully developed SumRock business plan basis. So I will tend to look at those. I will look for the big indicators, like is there a big expense change or a big rent uptick change? Are they, saying we're going to get 10%, and it should be 0 or 2. So everyone has to define conservative their own way, right? And it also, I look for information from the sponsors about where I can to understand more about their liquidity after the closing, right? Because like Brad said in his thing last night, he had to come in and inject capital into a place post 2008 to avoid a cash call. Because one thing we don't want is cash call, right? I mean, we want these deals to be wired tight and to have conservative underwriting and to have cash reserves on hand to weather these storms. So I think I can't really give a lot of like tricks or tips. I mean, I do a Google flyby, a Google Maps flyby on places. I look at the comps like we did our very first one in Hampton. It was easy. There was a few places nearby. We looked at those places. We looked at the apartment communities' websites. Just, you can see what kind of rent they're asking, what kind of amenities they have. So before you start driving all over the place looking at properties or hopping on a plane, do some flybys with Google Maps and stuff like that and look at stuff online. That's it for us. Mostly we're just researching things online to kind of verify and validate. And by the way, we have seen some deals where people will put a comp in there of like an A-class property, or they'll call their property a B-class property when it's not a B-class property. So, I like to see, it can be ugly and it can be lucrative. That's fine. But I don't like it if I see somebody putting lipstick on a pig, frankly. I've seen enough of that in corporate America.
Those guys that Class A as a firm on those things, we call them brokers.
Yes. Unfortunately, I've seen that with some deal sponsors here and there too. Not often, but it's like, why do you have that in there? It's just not it's not relevant. And then I see, you see something like that, and you kind of, okay, well, I'm gonna step back here.
Yeah. Well, we usually ask our guests about how are they either sponsors or passive investors. How are they preparing for a potential downturn in the economy? So I think that question is not valid anymore because we are in the downturn now. So
Yeah.
what do you think is going to be different on your way of analyzing deals? What do you think is important now that maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, now that we have this imminent threat here with the virus and the economic downfall that's going to remain after the virus is gone in a few weeks, right?
Yeah, really, I'm think I'm going to be a bit more conservative, as I really like Brad's guidance that he gave last night, right? Kind of shift out your pro forma by a year, because if it still looks good, and for me, since I still do some cash investing, of course, too, I do take into account the benefit of the bonus depreciation and all that, as it's not going to pay the whole load, but what I need to do is see that I've got good return coming for a year, it's stabilizing over a year, and then the rest is upside, right? Because right now we all have to look at, is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? How long is this thing going to really hit us? And of course, with new laws coming out or breaks for people, yeah, clearly some people are going to play those rules, and they're going to not pay their rent, even though they have savings or they have money, and we're going to see, I think, a lot of that. And just like when the housing bust happened in 2008, we took a hit on our house we bought at the end of 2006, and my wife and I looked at our wristwatches together and said, let's see, about 10 years our house value will be back to where it should be. So for I heard questions last night about, well, what's this going to do with cap rate, reversion cap rate? To me, reversion cap rate, that's years down the road, follow historical norms. So for most of the underwriting I'm looking at, I'm saying follow historical norms, because this is a long play. You might take a little longer to get distributions, right? You have to have a good, actually, I'm going to look for higher occupancy and stabilization going in the door, because the good sponsors, and I've seen several, are doing everything they can to retain those tenants, right? Give them some time, give them some payment plan, do something a little extra that maybe other apartment owners would not do. And I also am looking for bonus upside, right? I've seen some business plans where people say, actually, Claudia and Martin, you guys are a great example. Oh, we can turn these into 3-bedroom units, and we can do this over here. And it's not in our pro forma, but here's an upside. So I also look for these nice little nuggets of gold that people can bring beyond just the conventional model. It's time to be conservative, really. It just is.
I think it's pretty important to differentiate between the impact that we're going to have with the virus, which could be 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks, and it's going to be related to those people that are our tenants and their ability to pay them. I think that's going to be a short period compared to the full economic distress that we're seeing in the financial markets. That's going to take longer, right? So we have to prepare for both, and I think differently. And we have to start now, both from the asset management side and also as passive investors, because we still invest passively, right? So we have to keep an eye on what are we going to put our money, the money that we don't have as much control of as the ones we invest as sponsors. Where are we putting it, and which criteria we have to follow? So yeah, we are very aligned with what you said. I don't know if I wanted to remind everyone we have around 5 minutes left. If you have any questions that you've been holding on, this is the time. You can put them on the chat. You can raise your hand. And Marcelo, I don't know if you have a following question.
Yeah. So so since we're talking about what's happening right now, Elliott, what are some of the things that you have seen communicated from the sponsors on some of the measurements that they're taking to prepare for what's happening?
Yeah, I've seen, again, in the 12 deals that we're in, I think I've seen maybe 6, maybe 7 now, notes come out from the sponsors saying, okay, actually, I'm getting them from every business imaginable, right? And I'm sure you are too, just seeing everybody's got something to say about this. But I'm particularly interested in what the sponsors have to say. And in most cases, yeah, I'm seeing, in some cases, people are saying, you know, kind of hunker down and we're going to hold off on any distributions to stabilize cash. And I say, okay, well, that's, as an investor, that's a little rough at first, and some of them were coming a little earlier than I might have expected. So that I might say, well, maybe you were struggling a little bit, and that gives you an excuse to just send something out. Maybe, maybe not. But okay, I mean, I forgiven. It's more, again, long play, big picture. So I have seen folks coming out with ideas to help, you know, spread the rent out to keep the people there, you know, give them some grace, reducing, you know, penalties for late payments, right? I think Donald Trump and company are going to do something here about, or doing something here about evictions, right? So you might see some, we are, I think, seeing some forced delays in evictions. But again, these are temporary measures. I think I have to say I am impressed seeing with what the authorities are doing around in Texas here, certainly, and globally, to flatten out that curve. I think that's a very big deal for us all, so that this thing's going to take time to pass. Lots of people are still going to get it. It's going to impact our properties and our investments. It's just going to. But if you look at what it did to the stock market, again, it's a whole nother world of instant pain and panic there, that I don't think we're going to see the panic here. I think we're going to see people scheming a little to say, I can get away with this for a month or 2 months. And, you know, but tenants who want to have good records as tenants also are not going to want to keep having this big hole either. It's not good for, you know, long term. I just don't see it being a long term thing. That said, I would say anything we say, oh, 6 to 8 weeks, think 6 months. And 6 months is probably still optimistic. And like most good project management, right? It's like Amir and me from the power industry. Our mantra is usually take your estimate and triple it, and you're pretty safe, right? So if you think 6 months, you know, think 12, think it could be 18. The economic hits from this, nobody knows. It's gonna. We're going to see how long it takes, but if we can get this curve to start going back down, I think everything's going to start coming back. I think there's going to be deals to be found for those of us interested in syndicating over this year and next year. There's going to be some sweetheart deals to start bubble up from, and Brad mentioned last night too, maybe some mom and pops that, you know, start taking out of the business. They just don't want to mess with that anymore. So I think there's going to be, honestly, to look at the upside, right, as we end the call, there's an upside. I think there's going to be a lot of great deals coming up out there that were not happening because of the hyper competitive situation, certainly going on in Dallas and now in Houston.
Yeah, for sure. So do you have any books or podcasts that you would recommend for someone starting?
I highly, highly recommend, and I know this like dates me and goes back in time, but the Rich Dad stuff, right? I mean, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was a life changer for me, but Cash Flow Quadrant was like, wow, now I see, you know, the whole concept of putting in money into assets, getting out of liabilities, getting at cash flow from assets and putting them back in to buying more assets. It makes you more cash flow that you can buy more assets. I'm like, man, this is how I could retire. Otherwise, I got to work forever to have a nice lifestyle and pay for my kids. So definitely the Kiyosaki stuff. Cash Flow Quadrant for me was one of the biggest. And then when I got into this group, somebody told me the very first day about Tom Wheelwright's Tax-Free Wealth. Another fantastic book. On podcasts, I wouldn't go into that because there's just so many zillions of them. I mean, watch all of them that you got time for. Everyone, you know, go to meetups. Like I'm in Brad's group, but I also try to go to meetups that are out of Brad's group, right? Because we learn different things from different people. You meet different providers, professionals, things like that. And if you get out to Katy, you meet great guys like Henry Holt. You never know. So you know, those for me, those were biggies. They were really biggies. And what's really been cool is, being on these Facebook sites and everything, there's all kinds of people in real estate who I've come to know, like, and trust that are constantly recommending great books and podcasts. I'm like, oh, I'll go check that out. So I think I go back to the basics on that, especially if you're starting out and you want to get an education on why this works, and then figure out how it works with a program like Brad's or something else.
Yep, for sure. Anybody has any additional questions before we wrap it up?
Thanks, Elliott. Good job.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, that was great, Elliott. Great job.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And y'all stay safe, and we'll see you at the next meetup once they let us out of the cage again.
Yeah.
Exactly, and we're gonna still be here online next month. Like I said, we meet first and third Wednesday, so this will always be a virus-free environment. So you guys are always welcome to come in.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of the Multifamily 0 to 1. Join us live the first and third Wednesday of every month.